Every neighborhood has a house that people avoid talking about, not because it's abandoned, not because it looks haunted, but because something about it has never felt completely normal. Most people learn to ignore those places. They drive past them every day without asking questions. Years go by. Families move in. Families move out. Life continues. Until one day, someone notices a pattern that everyone else has spent years pretending not to see. This story begins in the quiet town of Ashwood, Oregon. A town surrounded by dense forests, narrow roads, and neighborhoods where every house looked almost identical. Children rode bicycles through the streets. Neighbors waved from their front porches. Nothing about Ashwood suggested that it would one day become the center of one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in the state. It was the kind of place where people locked their doors out of habit, not fear. For years, Ashwood had been considered one of the safest communities in the county. Crime was rare. Violence was almost unheard of. Which is exactly why what happened on Ashwood Lane made so little sense. Late in the spring of 2019, a young couple named Ethan and Claire Dawson purchased a two-story colonial home at the end of a quiet street. The property wasn't unusual. It had a white wooden fence, a small front porch, and an old maple tree standing near the driveway. The previous owners had lived there for nearly 30 years before quietly relocating to another state. According to the realtor, the sale had gone smoothly. There were no legal disputes. No history of violent crime. No reason to suspect anything was wrong. To Ethan and Claire, it felt like the beginning of a new life. The house was larger than their apartment. The neighborhood was peaceful. For the first time, they could imagine raising a family somewhere permanent. Moving trucks arrived the following weekend. Furniture filled the empty rooms. Painters worked inside the house. Electricians replaced aging fixtures. Every day, the property looked more like a home. Neighbors occasionally stopped by to introduce themselves. Most stayed only a few minutes. Some welcomed the couple warmly. Others seemed strangely uncomfortable. Several conversations ended the same way. A smile. A polite goodbye. Then a quick glance toward the house before walking away. At first, Ethan dismissed it. Older neighborhoods often had curious residents. Nothing seemed particularly strange. Until the fourth evening. The moving crew had already left. The sun had almost disappeared behind the trees. Ashwood Lane was unusually quiet. While checking the mailbox for utility information, Ethan noticed a single cream-colored envelope resting inside. There was no stamp. No return address. Only one line written across the front. To the new keepers. The handwriting looked old-fashioned. Every letter had been written carefully. Almost deliberately. For a moment, Ethan assumed it was some kind of welcome note from a neighbor. He opened the envelope without thinking. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message was short. It congratulated the family on finding such a beautiful home. It welcomed them to Ashwood Lane. Then, without warning, the tone changed. The writer claimed the house had always belonged to people who understood its responsibility. Every family had protected it. Watched over it. Respected it. According to the letter, ownership of the house was temporary. The responsibility was permanent. Near the bottom of the page, one sentence stood apart from the others. The windows have already learned your routines. There was no signature. No explanation. Nothing else. Just blank paper beneath the final sentence. At first, Ethan laughed. The letter sounded dramatic. Maybe someone nearby enjoyed strange practical jokes. Claire wasn't convinced. She folded the paper carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. Something about the wording felt unusually personal. Not threatening. Not exactly. But unsettling enough that neither of them wanted to leave it lying around. That night, neither of them mentioned the letter again. Instead, they continued unpacking boxes. They assembled furniture, hung family photographs, and tried to convince themselves that the strange note meant nothing. Outside, Ashwood Lane remained silent. Streetlights reflected against rain-soaked pavement. The maple tree beside the driveway moved gently in the wind. Everything appeared completely ordinary. Just after midnight, the security camera installed above the garage detected movement. Only 6 seconds. A shadow crossed the edge of the driveway, then disappeared before the camera could capture a clear image. The following morning, Ethan reviewed the footage. The recording showed nothing recognizable. Only a blurred figure standing near the mailbox before vanishing into darkness. The police later suggested it was probably an animal, or perhaps a neighbor walking past. The footage simply wasn't clear enough. Life returned to normal. For 2 days. On the third morning, another envelope appeared. No stamp. No return address. The same handwriting. The same careful lettering. But this time, the message inside began with only 6 words. You looked outside last night. The second envelope looked almost identical to the first. The same cream-colored paper. The same careful handwriting. No postage. No fingerprints visible on the surface. No indication of how it had arrived inside a locked mailbox. Only 6 unsettling words greeted the family before the rest of the message unfolded. You looked outside last night. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a coincidence. The writer knew exactly what Ethan had done after reviewing the security footage. Whoever had written the letter wasn't describing an event from weeks ago. They were describing something that had happened less than 12 hours earlier. The realization was impossible to ignore. Someone had been watching the house. And somehow they also knew what was happening inside it. The rest of the letter became even stranger. The anonymous writer complimented the family for replacing the old kitchen lights. The message also mentioned the upstairs bedroom that would eventually become a nursery. No one outside the family had ever discussed those plans. The room was still empty. The walls hadn't even been painted. Yet somehow, the writer already knew. For the first time, Ethan stopped treating the letters like a prank. The couple contacted the Ashwood Police Department later that afternoon. Officers photographed the letters, collected the envelopes, and documented every detail they could find. Nothing immediately stood out. There were no obvious fingerprints. No saliva on the envelope flap. Even the paper itself appeared ordinary. One detective quietly suggested that someone in the neighborhood might simply be trying to frighten the new owners. It wasn't impossible. Neighborhood disputes happened. Anonymous complaints happened. But this felt different. The language wasn't angry. It wasn't demanding money. There were no threats of violence. Instead, the letters sounded patient. Almost protective. As though the writer believed the house belonged to them in some invisible way. The police increased patrols around Ashwood Lane for several nights. Nothing unusual happened. No suspicious vehicles. No strangers walking through the neighborhood. No reports from nearby residents. It was as if the writer had completely vanished. Days passed without another letter. The tension slowly began to fade. Claire returned to decorating the house. Boxes disappeared one by one. Family photographs covered empty walls. For a brief moment, life almost felt normal again. Then something changed. One Saturday morning, Ethan climbed into the attic looking for extra storage space. The attic had been empty during the home inspection. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. As his flashlight swept across the wooden floorboards, it reflected off something metallic near the far corner. An old key. Beside it sat a dusty cardboard box covered in decades of dirt. Inside were dozens of faded photographs. Every photograph showed the same house. The same front porch. The same maple tree. The same driveway. But the dates written on the back stretched back more than 40 years. Different families. Different cars. Different seasons. Yet always the same house. Someone had carefully documented nearly every family that had ever lived there. Some photographs appeared to have been taken from across the street. Others from inside parked vehicles. A few looked as though they had been captured from behind trees. None of the people in the pictures appeared aware they were being photographed. The oldest images had begun to curl with age. The newest one stopped almost 10 years earlier. Then, nothing. No explanation. No names. No notes. Just decades of silent observation. The discovery left Ethan with more questions than answers. Who had collected them? Why were they hidden inside the attic? And why had no previous owner ever mentioned them? The police returned later that afternoon. Every photograph was carefully packaged as evidence. Investigators searched the attic for fingerprints. Nothing useful was recovered. The cardboard box itself had deteriorated so badly that identifying when it had been placed there proved almost impossible. The detective handling the case made a troubling observation. If the photographs truly belonged to the anonymous letter writer, then whoever had been watching the house might have been doing it for decades. Not months. Not years. Decades. News of the investigation quietly spread throughout Ashwood. Neighbors began closing their curtains earlier than usual. Children stopped riding bicycles near the end of Ashwood Lane. Some residents suddenly claimed they remembered seeing unfamiliar cars parked near the house years earlier. Others insisted nothing unusual had ever happened. The neighborhood slowly divided into two groups. Those who believed the letters were the work of a disturbed individual. And those who believed something about the house had never been fully explained. Meanwhile, another envelope was already making its way toward the mailbox. This one would contain no warnings. No strange observations. Only a single photograph. A photograph taken through the Dawson family's living room window. Less than 24 hours earlier. The photograph arrived without a note. No explanation. No warning. Just a single glossy print, folded neatly inside another cream-colored envelope. At first glance, it looked ordinary. It showed the Dawson family's living room on a rainy evening. The couch. The coffee table. The bookshelf they had assembled only days earlier. Everything appeared exactly as it had the night before. Until Ethan noticed something impossible. The photograph had been taken from outside the front window. Someone had stood only a few feet away from the glass. Whoever held the camera had a perfectly clear view inside the house. The realization sent a chill through the entire investigation. This wasn't someone watching from across the street anymore. Someone had walked directly onto the property. The police returned within an hour. Officers searched every inch of the yard for footprints. The ground was soft from 2 days of rain. Yet nothing remained. No shoe prints. No tire tracks. No broken branches. It was as if the photographer had appeared, and disappeared without leaving a trace. Investigators immediately reviewed every security camera in the neighborhood. The Dawson family's cameras showed nothing unusual. The neighboring houses captured passing cars, joggers, delivery drivers. But no one carrying a camera. No figure approaching the front porch. No suspicious movement. Nothing. It made no sense. A detective eventually proposed a simple explanation. Perhaps the photographer knew exactly where every camera was positioned. If someone had spent years observing the neighborhood, avoiding surveillance would not have been difficult. The theory was reasonable. But it didn't explain everything. A week later, another discovery complicated the case even further. A utility technician arrived to inspect an aging electrical junction near the edge of the property. While clearing away overgrown bushes, he uncovered something hidden beneath loose soil. A small weatherproof container. Inside was an old digital memory card. The device looked as though it had been buried for years. Its plastic casing had faded from exposure to moisture. Investigators recovered the card and sent it to a forensic lab. Several days later, technicians managed to recover hundreds of image files. Most were damaged beyond repair. Others revealed something deeply unsettling. They showed the same house. Across different seasons. Snow. Autumn leaves. Heavy rain. Bright summer afternoons. The photographs stretched back nearly a decade. Each one had been taken from a different location. Behind trees. From parked vehicles. From empty sidewalks. Someone had documented the property for years. The photographs became more disturbing over time. Later images captured moving trucks. Contractors. Gardeners. Delivery drivers. Anyone who visited the property appeared somewhere inside the collection. It wasn't just the house that had been watched. It was everyone connected to it. The police expanded the investigation. Former owners were contacted. Some remembered receiving strange phone calls years earlier. Others recalled finding unexplained footprints around the backyard. None had reported those incidents. Each believed they had experienced an isolated event. Only now did investigators begin connecting the stories. One retired couple revealed something unexpected. Shortly before selling the house, they had started receiving blank envelopes. No letters. No messages. Just empty envelopes arriving once every few months. At the time, they dismissed them as junk mail. Looking back, they weren't so sure. The investigation gradually shifted away from the Dawson family. Detectives now suspected the house itself had always been the true target. The anonymous writer didn't appear interested in specific people. Families changed. Children grew up. Owners came and went. Yet the letters continued. Always connected to the same address. The same front porch. The same windows. The same maple tree standing silently beside the driveway. Meanwhile, Ashwood Lane had changed. Neighbors who once chatted outside now hurried indoors before sunset. Curtains remained closed. Outdoor lights stayed on until morning. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed the writer lived somewhere on the street. Others insisted the letters had originated from someone who had moved away years earlier. Everyone had a theory. No one had evidence. Then, exactly 34 days after the investigation began, the Dawson family's security system finally captured someone. Only for 3 seconds. A figure wearing a dark hood appeared beside the mailbox at exactly 2:17 in the morning. The person never looked toward the camera. Instead, they slowly placed another envelope inside the mailbox. Then walked calmly toward the edge of the street. Before reaching the corner, every nearby camera lost power. For 11 seconds. When electricity returned, the street was empty. The envelope remained. Waiting. The officers reached the mailbox less than 10 minutes after the security system alerted them. The street was silent. Rain had stopped. The pavement reflected the glow of streetlights stretching down the empty road. Inside the mailbox sat another cream-colored envelope. Dry. Untouched by the rain. Whoever had delivered it knew exactly how long they had before the police arrived. The envelope was sealed exactly like the others. No fingerprints. No return address. Only one line written across the front. You finally looked where you were supposed to. Forensic investigators carefully opened the letter. Unlike the previous messages, this one wasn't written on a single sheet. It contained 3 pages. The first described nothing unusual. It simply listed dates. Dates stretching back almost 50 years. Every date matched the day a new family had moved into the house. The second page listed names. Not full names. Only first names. Some belonged to former owners. Others matched contractors, electricians, painters, and delivery workers who had visited the property over the years. The final page contained only one sentence. Every house has a memory. This one never forgets. That sentence became the center of the investigation. Detectives no longer believed the writer was acting randomly. The letters suggested careful planning spanning decades. Somebody had devoted years, perhaps an entire lifetime, to documenting the house. But why? Investigators searched public records once again. Old building permits. Tax documents. Insurance claims. Property transfers. Every document connected to the address. Weeks later, they uncovered something that had somehow escaped previous investigations. Long before the current house existed, a smaller farmhouse had occupied the same land. It had burned to the ground in the early 1960s. The fire had never been ruled suspicious. No one had died. The incident was quickly forgotten as the neighborhood expanded around it. The discovery answered one question, but created many more. If the old house no longer existed, why had someone continued watching the land for decades afterward? The police interviewed elderly residents who had lived in Ashwood their entire lives. Most remembered the fire. Very few remembered the family who had lived there. One retired mail carrier recalled something unusual. For years, anonymous envelopes had occasionally appeared without postage. They were always addressed to whoever lived on that property. No one ever complained. No investigation had ever been opened. People simply assumed they were harmless neighborhood pranks. Looking back, they weren't harmless at all. Months passed. The national media slowly lost interest. The investigation grew colder. Detectives were reassigned. Evidence was archived. The mailbox remained empty. For the first time since moving in, the Dawson family began believing the nightmare might finally be over. They completed the renovations. Planted flowers beside the porch. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. Then, on a quiet autumn afternoon, Claire noticed something while organizing family photographs. A framed picture taken during their first week in the house had accidentally fallen behind a bookshelf. As she wiped away the dust, she froze. Standing across the street, barely visible beneath the branches of the old maple tree, was a figure. Dark clothing, hands folded, face impossible to identify. The figure hadn't been noticed when the photograph was taken. It had blended perfectly into the background. Police enhanced the image. The resolution was too poor to identify anyone. Another dead end. The photograph became just another piece of evidence stored inside an already overcrowded case file. Winter arrived. Snow covered Ashwood Lane. Neighbors stopped talking about the letters. Children played outside again. The street looked peaceful. Exactly as it always had. The Dawson family remained in the home. Not because they no longer felt afraid, but because fear had become part of everyday life. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't the ones that end with an arrest. Sometimes, the most disturbing stories are the ones that simply stop. No confession. No explanation. No suspect. Only silence. Years later, the case remained officially unsolved. The letters were preserved inside evidence boxes. The photographs remained unexplained. The hidden memory card never revealed who buried it. No fingerprints ever matched a known individual. No camera ever captured a clear face. To this day, Visitors driving through Ashwood Lane see nothing unusual. Children still ride bicycles. Neighbors still wave from their porches. The white fence has been repainted. The old maple tree still stands beside the driveway. Everything appears perfectly ordinary. Until you notice the mailbox. Because every spring, without fail, someone quietly leaves a single cream-colored envelope inside. The current owners have never spoken publicly about what those letters contain. But one fact has never changed. They never tell anyone who delivered them. And somehow, the envelopes never arrive through the mail. Maybe it's only an old neighborhood legend. Maybe someone has been continuing the same cruel prank for decades. Or maybe some houses are watched long after the people inside have forgotten to look outside. Sometimes the safest looking street hides the longest running secret. Fade to black.